Hi everybody, Savannah Tree Foundation Field Manager Jake Henry here, and today we're doing a video on what it looks like to have your trees assessed by a professional certified arborist. Our focus this week is on storms and hurricanes and how to maintain your trees before that comes around. And so one of those steps is actually being able to identify some of the things that might be problematic in a storm, and we're going to have an arborist today tell us about some of those things. So we actually have Shem Kendrick here. He's the co-owner of Coastal Arbor Care and board member on the Savannah Tree Foundation. And he's gonna walk through a few things today, things to look for and things that might be problematic in a storm, right?
Yes.
All right.
Thanks for having us, Jake.
Yeah.
So first we're gonna talk about, well, this whole conversation is gonna be on tree risk. So in order for there to be tree risk, there needs to be a target. So those targets can be a house, pedestrians, high traffic areas, roads, whatnot. So if you have a tree in the middle of the field, there's very limited risk for that tree. So when we do these assessments, we're going to focus mainly on trees that have a target. Then another thing I look for is what my client's level of acceptable risk is. So is my client able to tolerate some risk in order to enjoy the beauty and all the things that these trees add. And then some people, they're just terrified of storms or whatnot. If that's you, this might not be the best conversation for you, or perhaps we could persuade you to come onto the green side. Yeah, so we're gonna start with this water oak. Water oak is one of the trees I focus on a lot. Water oaks, laurel oaks, and pines. Those are going to be the three species that are here locally that tend to have issues.
Right.
I would like to say that pines are kind of the pit bull of trees. They're really misunderstood. A lot of the risk that is resulting from them is actually from humans and what they do when they develop, when they cut roots, when they trim a lot of the lower limbs off. One of the things that makes pines so susceptible to uprooting is they have a low live crown ratio. So that's when the limbs are primarily in the upper portion of the tree. And this creates more of a lever arm, so the wind is able to get some leverage there. And whereas an oak, for instance, has a live crown ratio that goes much lower. So you have a lot more limbs, they're lower, they're high, they're in between, and they create what's called reinforced harmonics. So they blow together in the wind, they bump together, and this actually dissipates the force of the wind. So they're less likely to uproot. Anyway, we'll start here on this water oak, and the tools I have here, very basic. They get a lot more complex, but what I have here is just a soil probe, so I'm able to both put that into cavities to tell how deep they might be. Also, if I suspect a tree is partially uprooting, I can poke this in the ground around the root zone, and you can feel where you hit less or more resistance, and that might be from air pockets as the root lift a little bit.
Gotcha.
And then this is just a basic rubber mallet, and I use this to sound trees. So I would do it, and you can do this. It takes a little bit to train your ear, but if you have a tree that you know is hollow, start on that one and then go to a tree that's not, and you can tell the difference. But basically, you're just going to tap up the trunk and just try to listen to a change in tone. You'll hear more like a hollow drum sound if this tree is hollow, and then we'll just kind of go around to do that. So that's a good way to tell, even on your own, if there might be some hollow or decay in the tree. And these, like I said, these water oaks are notorious for that. And you might not notice that at all in the canopy. The canopy will be completely green, no sign of decay, but it could be completely hollow because actually the tree only needs about the outer 2 to 3 inches to sustain a healthy canopy, but it could be very susceptible to uprooting because it's missing all that structural wood.
Right. Structure and health.
Yes.
Gotta have both.
Yeah. All right, so what I'm looking at here, obviously the first thing that stands out is that column of decay. So you have quite a bit of load above that, so that's gonna catch the wind, and you have this large weak spot right here. So that would be the first part I would guess would fail on this tree during high winds. Now over here we have a road, so you do have a target. However, it's a low risk target because this road, there's not a lot of traffic on this road.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there might be 2 or 3 minute increments before cars are coming down here, and hopefully they're not driving during the storm. So
Right.
that's not extremely high risk, but there's definitely some risk there. We also have the house over here on this side, and this tree is tall enough to reach the house. However, it's going to be a lot of the smaller limbs, so it might cause some roof damage, maybe rip up the fascia a little bit, but we're not going to get a lot of destruction there. So looking here, as far as tree defects go, right here we have what's called an included bark, and right here. So essentially when this tree was much smaller, trees go 2 ways. They grow up and they grow out or larger in diameter. When this tree was smaller, we had 3 distinct stems. Actually, I think there's a 4th one over there. So as this tree grows in diameter, they start fusing together to the point where in 5 or 10 years, you might not even notice that once upon a time these were attached down here, and they might look like they're actually branching out from up here. But what happens is that there's no interlocking of the grain, so you don't have any structural stability there, and they're actually pushing against each other, so it's going to weaken down here. So that would be prone to splitting there. Possibly one or the other side would split off in high winds. Another thing here is these deep ridges here, or valleys, along here. You'll see quite a few. Now this isn't always a sign of this, but oftentimes that means that you do have some decay in there and some hollow areas when you get that. The reason why, the tree is naturally healing and sealing, so it's putting on more tissue to guard that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another sign. Like I said, it's not always the case, but generally a more smooth, rounded structure is going to be healthier.
So now we're looking at pine trees, right? So we're gonna, you know, a lot of folks get pine phobic in urban environments, and they're not always a bad thing. So Shem, can you tell us a little bit about what we should look for with pine trees with regards to storms?
Certainly. Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier about the crown ratio, these are more susceptible. You can see these first limbs here. This one actually to the left is pretty good. You got a lot of lower limbs. As I mentioned, the more those limbs are located up at the top, the more leverage the wind's going to get. One thing I would be a little worried about with this one is you have a lot of weight on one side, so that the tree is obviously going to want to follow that direction. And given the right amount of wind in that direction, it could go that way. But once again, we don't have a house there. We've got a pretty low traffic street. Another thing that's a positive here is we have 2 pines right next to each other. So these roots are interlocking, so they're giving each other stability. Now if you cut one tree down, as this stump decays, a lot of these roots that we're using that for anchorage, they're not going to be able to build up faster, and they're going to not have anchorage here because of that decay. So this tree would now become more likely to uproot in this direction. So those roots are really helping each other, and that's a lot of the pine failures that I see on the day-to-day, both in storms and just in thunderstorms, are these developments. And they come in, they have a whole stand of trees, and you take out 90% of the trees, and they leave this beautiful pine. And these trees have really low crown ratios. They grow in a stand of trees, so they're just growing for the light, so they don't develop taper, which is, as this tree, you can see here how it swells near the base. That's really a good sign, because that is callus wood, is reaction wood that the tree puts on as the wind moves it, and it develops that to brace itself in place. So these trees in developments, they don't have that. They're very tall, skinny, and they're not used to experiencing the wind on their own. They're used to shared wind loads from the other trees. So that's a huge reason why people should be afraid of pines, or are afraid of pines, is because they associate that with pines in general, but it's actually a result of how these developments are done. And maybe poor planning.
Right, and you know, sometimes it's difficult to know the history of a tree. If somebody moves into a new property, you know, it may not show those effects immediately. So
yeah,
that's always a challenge too.
yeah. So yeah, with pines, what I say is, if you have a group of them, you have less to be worried about if they're grouped together. Even with other trees, just something to break that wind load. Also, if you have a 2-story house, sometimes that can reduce some of the wind impact on it.
Okay, so here we have red oak, and Shem's going to walk us through some things he would look for on a tree like this. So go ahead, Shem.
So the first thing I would start with on a tree like this is the codominant stem. So that's when, instead of just one main trunk with scaffold limbs growing off of that, we have 2 main trunks here. So obviously the point of failure is almost always going to be where those conjoin. So sure enough, right here, we have the same thing we saw on that water oak, which is included bark. And you can see, if you stand on the side over here, Jake, you can see how it swells out this way. Once upon a time, this tree was, this union was actually down here, and as those stems grew larger in diameter, they started closing this gap up, and now they're pushing on each other, and we don't have that interlocking grain there. So that's something to be a little bit concerned about, but not overly, I would say. Now there's options here, and one would be reducing some weight over the structure up higher in the canopy. Another would be actually cabling, and normally I don't suggest that unless we start to see some separation, but we can actually pull those stems back together and put a cable in there. And even if you have had some separation, we'll even put some brace rods through, and you can really seal it up and save your tree. We have some history of limb failure. You can see a stub up there, and there's a tear down that limb that broke off, and it looks like it killed the bark back. Now this was some years ago, and so it did some damage to the cambium, and you have some decay, and you can also see that swollen area, which is the tree trying to seal that up. But it's also, and it's doing a pretty good job, so we know the tree is fairly healthy, but that's a little bit of an area of concern. So I would suggest, since this is kind of leaning towards the structure, that we do a little bit of weight reduction. So some of those limbs that are farthest on the side of the lean, we'll just go ahead and cut those back a few feet to give it a little bit less wind sail, and also just a little less weight in that direction.
Okay, so we've got one last thing we're going to look at here with Shem. And Shem, can you explain what we're going to look at on this tree?
So we noticed down here at eye level, see some dark discoloration on the bark. So that's something you want to look at. So we're like, oh, what's up there? And sure enough, about 20 feet up, we see it gets darker and darker, and then it's actually some liquid that's coming out of that hollow spot in the tree. Now this stuff is called slime flux, which is a pathogen in the tree that is a decay causing pathogen. So you'll get that where an old scar was. You can see, I don't know if you can see here, but it's kind of flat around there. So it looks like it was probably an old wound from a limb being removed. Possibly even flush cut is what I'm thinking. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it looks pretty close to the tree. Yeah.
So what happens when you're cutting off a large limb and cut it too flush, the tree's not able to compartmentalize and seal that. So it looks like it healed up or sealed around that cut, but not fast enough that these pathogens didn't get in there and start decay. So what we're looking at there is slime flux, and there's no treatment for it. So sadly, at some point, this tree is going to have to come down before that spreads. That's also a sign that there is a hollow spot up there. So once again, we have a lot of load and wind sail above that spot. So that tree is likely to fail just above or at that area, possibly in a storm. Now, one thing to consider with dead trees or trees like this that have defects, although we should probably take it out, luckily our client here loves nature, and that makes a perfect habitat tree. So we're thinking about taking it down to about 10 or 15 feet above that area. there we're not going to have any issues in storms because there's no wind sail, and the rest of it is fairly healthy. But that's going to give some awesome habitat to woodpeckers and owls, and who knows what else. As that decay sets in more and that hole gets larger, then we'll have a lot of habitat that can enjoy this tree for years. So that's something to consider when we're removing trees, because in an urban setting, we end up cutting down all the trees that are endangering our property. But these trees that are dead or decayed or hollow, those are the perfect habitat for so many wild animals, and they're getting pushed out because we're cutting them all down. So if you have a property and you have, as we mentioned in the beginning, if there is no target, then there's no risk. So if you have a large property and these trees aren't threatening your property or your house or cars or whatnot, that it's great to go ahead and leave them. Let them enjoy the circle of life. As they decay, they're going to give awesome habitat to all these creatures, and then they're also going to decompose and give back to the earth.
Right. Thank you so much, Shem, for all your wonderful advice today and helping these folks identify potential risk factors for trees and things that might be of concern. And we always recommend, if folks need to hire a tree care company, we recommend hiring one that has a certified arborist on staff. And you have a lovely little patch here. I just wanted to zoom in. That's what it looks like. So folks can keep an eye out for that logo. Make sure that they have a certified professional evaluating their trees. So thanks again, Shem. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right.